Before we start the session, let's just step back for a couple of moments of silence. So greetings to you all. And just before we start, I thought a few words about the hosts, NAMAH, would be appropriate because NAMAH, the Journal of Integral Health, isn't just engaged in running workshops, courses and programs online and live. It's a long-standing and insightful publication available in print or as an e-journal. So NAMAH is the Journal of Integral Health, and it looks at the influence of the soul or the spirit in man's search for health and well-being. It examines man's physical and mental health in an integral way, and it looks at it in terms of its growth and spiritual progress, as everything is always interconnected. It looks at individual and social health from the perspective of the evolutionary process. So it's a vast field, and the range of material we publish is really very diverse. But the one common denominator is the influence of the soul on our health and its influence on the rest of our being. So NAMAH is published quarterly and available online for subscription in either format, print or e-journal. So I definitely recommend you give it a try. It's a real work of dedication and love. So the next session is about progression within the integral yoga. Yesterday, Dr. Alok spoke at quite a lot of length about aspiration. It's very clear that aspiration is such an important foundation in integral yoga practice. Indeed, practice is almost meaningless and valueless without aspiration. So see what's in store for the second session. So over to you, Dr. Alok.
Namaste. So yesterday we spoke about the beginnings of yoga, which is primarily when there is a call within. Now, this is the term Sri Aurobindo used, call for the yoga. Obviously, it is an inner thing. It is an inner feeling. And this feeling is deeper than just the surface emotion, that this is what one wants to do. This is what one is born to do. The more definitive this feeling is, the more crystallized and clear, the more one can say that the call has been received and now one has to walk the path. So this is the main starting point, and it starts with faith and aspiration, which are the two lead powers that lead us on the way. So this aspiration, even this call, is not always felt so clearly. It takes the form of an interest in the mind, an attraction to the philosophical aspect or some other aspect, an urge, as I said, to visit Pondicherry, to pick up the books, read them. But the best preparation that one can do is, apart from these, while the call is not yet clear and distinct, is to become conscious. And by becoming conscious, what is meant is to become conscious of the motives and why one is doing whatever one is doing. So we'll see that the mind usually gives a very habitual justification. And as we progress on the yoga, the justifications become more and more subtle. And as the mind develops, they become more and more complex. So one has to go behind all these and see things for what they are. That's why a certain degree of spiritual realism, as Aurobindo puts it, is so important. It keeps us on the one side grounded while we fly from the other wing, because otherwise there is a tendency to get lost into all the haze and maze of the mid-worlds, into some kind of a fantasy imagination, and start believing that one is journeying. So it's very important to ground ourselves, to be very conscious of what our motives are. And this motive applies as much and even more rigorously to the very purpose of yoga. Why do we want to do the yoga, as the mother puts it? And we should be clear that yoga is done for the sake of the divine. So this is the basic background. When we are clear that we are not doing it for any other motive, not for health, not for this, not for that, not for getting an upadhi, a degree, or or a certificate, or start our own yoga factory, then it's clear that, well, when we know that divine is the reason of our existence, then it's very clear that we are meant for the path. Before that, one is getting ready. Nothing wrong with that. These are all steps and stages. Now, once one has the call for the path, then what processes and methods one has to do? They come later. So there are two kinds of processes. We know that in yoga practices, two processes are involved primarily. One is physical, the second is psychological, and there are some psychophysical also. So as yoga evolves, yoga itself has evolved from the Hatha yoga, where the processes are primarily physical, to Raj yoga, where there are psychophysical. In the sense, there are some psychological processes, as well as there are some physical processes, which includes breathing, pranayama, etc. And then the yoga of the Gita, which is primarily psychology, with a very little stress on the physical. It's as human beings evolve, they become aware of their subjective inner being, they become aware of their thoughts, feelings, will. Yoga also grows, becomes more and more subtle. In other words, its takeoff point is its high. Like Aurobindo says, in our yoga, we begin with the idea that the soul is involved in the mind. So we start from that. The processes are primarily psychological. It means that we have to understand our psychological apparatus, lay it bare before the light, and use whatever is there as part of this apparatus to discover and manifest the divine in life and in everyday activity. How does this discovery start? Well, it starts with the light. So there are two kinds of light that we have. One is faith and the other is aspiration. So faith leads us to discover the divine, because something in us, if it has faith, it will hold on. Faith is not a belief. Belief is a mental system. Belief is about what God is God is not. It's about certain conceptions. But for faith, it is that there is the divine and he has called me to the path and therefore he will take me through it. Now, this is faith. It's not a structure of the mind. So when faith is there and the will to persist through all the difficulties and challenges are there, the person is destined to reach the path, reach the goal. Whatever may happen on the way, because it's a unique journey, it's an adventure, as the mother said. But if these two things are there, one is faith. Out of these, most important is faith. But if faith and the will here is not hesitating will, today I'll engage in the practice and after 2 days I give up, or I say, why should I be doing this at all? Maybe, other things are better. Tries different paths. So such a person actually arrives nowhere. So faith and will, faith that there is the divine, faith that the divine has called me to the path, and if he has called me to the path, he will see me through it, because primarily it becomes the responsibility of the divine who has called us to the path. This is the faith that is required in the yoga. And will, which persists regardless of challenges and obstacles, not only outside in the circumstances and situations, but in our own inner life, which offers many more obstacles. So if these two things are there, we are ready for the flight. Then the thing that is most important, as we just heard, is aspiration. Aspiration is the fire, Agni, it leads in the front. So the fire of aspiration must be held in the front. It carries us through the journey. Now here again, aspiration expresses itself differently in different parts of our being. So the seat of aspiration is in the soul, in the center of the chest. And here the core aspiration is to become one with the divine. That is the core aspiration of every soul, because it has been separated for long, for millenniums, perhaps trillenniums. And there comes a time when it wakes up to the divine reality and wants to rush into the divine and become one with that. This is denied with a purpose, because then it will rush, leaving nature behind. That's why, especially in this yoga, have that aspiration at the core, but it's not like there is an intense aspiration and one arrives. That's why Aurobindo says, do not have vyakulta. Vyakulta means restlessness. So that's where the desire comes and mixes with the aspiration. Do not mix aspiration with ambition. Do not mix aspiration with any other demands. So pure aspiration arises from the seat of the soul, and it basically mounts upward to unite with the divine, or inward to join with the divine. And it's beautiful. This is the most important aspect of the yoga. But this aspiration can also manifest in the mind as a seeking for knowledge. And it's not just knowledge through book knowledge and reading of things, literature, but true knowledge. True knowledge means the knowledge which is there within us, or which is above us, and which can start revealing itself. That's what the Vedas are about. And if the doors of this true knowledge are opened, then we can say that one has started reading the Veda that is within us and the Veda that is inbuilt within creation. So true knowledge, that's the way it takes shape in the mind. In the heart, it takes it takes the form of seeking for the divine beloved. It's not just knowledge, but the love that one has sought for, but found nowhere. The love that automatically draws one toward the divine. And it is the shortest way, as yesterday we were speaking, because this emotional being is very close to the psyche. So if love and devotion for the divine, bhakti, has developed, then one is very close. It can become a very powerful and swift way of entering into contact with the soul. When Aurobindo was asked what is the way to discover the psychic being, he said that love, devotion, bhakti, surrender, these are the ways which are the shortest ways. One can go through the mind, but that would mean going through a long, long passage and quietening the mind layer by layer, and then one gets a glimpse of the psyche. Both have their own place, but the shortcut is through the soul, through the heart. The heart has wings and not the head, as the mother said. Now, this aspiration can also be ignited in the vital. There it takes the form of service to the divine. So otherwise the vital is the seat of ambition and those kind of activities, possession and the kind of joy of life. So here the joy of life comes only in service. When service to the divine starts giving us joy, and service to the divine becomes the motive of our life itself, then we may say that the vital has also been ignited by this fire. And there are signs that when the vital gets converted, that it does not care for its name, fame, etc., but it just wants to serve the divine in whatever way, whatever capacity. Many distractions come in each of these. As the fire begins to burn, the mind may be caught up into the illusion of knowledge. It may think that because I have read many books, because I can speak or write, therefore I have the truth. One has to be careful that these things may be help on the way, but they are not really the true knowledge. Similarly, the heart may feel that sometimes a kind of psychic emotion may arise within it, and it may like to hear certain songs as bhajans and participate in these activities. It may have the illusion of bhakti, but bhakti is when nothing else gives us joy except the divine and his name and his works and his deeds and his exploits. And when bhakti graduates into love, it is about self-giving completely to the divine. Similarly, there may be an illusion of work where one is working, say in an ashram setup or a center or somewhere, but basically one still is having that ambition. So this ambition of a certain seat or a power or a certain kind of activity which one thinks that is a superior activity, and certain kind of activities which are inferior. So even in an ashram setup, you may find people who may want to sit on the table and chair and work, and may regard that people who work, let's say, in the dining room as someone inferior. But it means that one has not really understood the spirit of service, because spirit of service is basically serving the divine by whatever means and in whichever way. Some people may think, for example, speaking is a big activity or a high kind of service, whereas you know, keeping the footwear in its place, being at the gates of the ashram is the inferior service. But it's not true. We have to get rid of all these notions. And this aspiration can also be lit up in the body. When it is lit up in the body, then the body no longer longs for comforts, whether there is air conditioned or there is not air conditioned, whether it's hot or whether it's cold, whether it rains. But it takes joy in its limbs and all its organs, if I may say so, being used at the service of the divine, for worship of the divine. Its daily activities become a worship of the divine. It's taking a bath, it's eating food. Every activity, going for a walk, becomes a service to the divine, and offering joy. So these are the ways in which, and the body also becomes more and more subtle. It begins to automatically grow into health and harmony. It begins to attract the forces of health and harmony. At one place, Mother says this, that those who are here for service have no right to fall ill. So it's so true, because the body begins to aspire for the divine, become more and more conscious. So this aspiration slowly starts lighting up all the inner chambers, and the more the merrier. Slowly each part which is untouched by this psychic fire begins to set aflame. So we'll discover that here in this corner was a doubt which was hiding. That is also lit up. Here in this heart, there was something which was still attached to the ignorant movement. There it is lit up. Here there was some ambition hiding behind my so-called service to the divine. That is also lit up. Here is the ego of being the servant of the divine. That is also lit up. Here the body is trying to say that, well, feel lazy. It is not going for work because it just feels not up to sorts, and that is also lit up. So it's a process, and this process goes on till the entire being becomes fire. So we can imagine how far aspiration can. So, but the seat of aspiration is always in the soul. And in the soul, it takes this form of giving itself to the divine, obeying only the divine will, living for the divine, loving the divine, and ultimately becoming one with the divine. That's how the psychic aspiration. And one can feel it in the heart. So this aspiration is like a flame that has to be nurtured. It's described in the Vedas as the child offspring. So it is the new birth. So like any new child which is born, it is said that 21 days, you don't take the child here, there, show it to, expose the child to all kinds of forces. So when the flame is small, one has to nurture it. So this newborn flame, if it is taken out into the world, one starts speaking about it. Oh, this is so wonderful. Why don't you turn to Mother and Aurobindo? And one starts meeting all kinds of people who are not turned to the yoga, or even if they are turned to the yoga, are largely, for various reasons. We should be careful. Guard it like a treasure. Faith and aspiration are too sacred, too special. They need to be guarded. They're not something to be exposed. So this that's why in the beginning, there are certain rules which are not said rules, but unsaid rules, vital interchanges, meeting all kinds of people, partying, celebrations, marriage, etc. But this flame is newborn. It will be susceptible to all kinds of energies and forces, which will try to stifle it. Described in Savitri, in Krishna Avatar, Sri Krishna Leela, it is described that as Sri Krishna is growing, Putana comes, it offers all kinds of formula feed. Then there are different forces who want to destroy it, storms, etc. Now, nothing can really destroy, it's true. But yet, one has to remember that one should guard it very, very carefully. So this is the aspect that aspiration and faith have to be guarded carefully against invasion or intrusion from all kinds of forces. So this is about aspiration. This is the key, one of the key processes. Here, it's important to remember that as we come in contact with the world, because as I've said, you have to guard the aspiration, but one will come in contact. When you come in contact with the world, all kinds of uh, waves are going to arise within us. Waves of feelings, thought suggestions, all kinds of things. So what is the practice there? One of the most important practice, the base of this yoga is equanimity, peace and equanimity. So that we don't get disturbed by various things and we can maintain our inner equanimity in the face of disturbances, in the face of things which are pleasant, in the face of things which are painful. It's a long practice. And this practice of equanimity itself takes several forms. So at the physical level, it takes the form of indifference. It's one way to practice equanimity. Be indifferent to all the things that are going around. It's a very good practice. And I often give this example. I love to give this example of Malnida as he was, going on the road one day. One sadhika suddenly stopped her and gave many insulting remarks. After some 10-15 minutes, he kept quietly listening. After that, he simply said, "Is it over? Are you done? Can I go?" And he just walked away. Now, this is in this kind of indifference, upeksha, prepares us. The second form of equanimity comes from the vital. It is titiksha. It is the ability to bear the wounds of life, to endure. Many things will come. People, situations, circumstances may try to hurt us. So, like a stoic, we have to endure them. If we start breaking down at everything, then the base, the adhar through which manifestation has to take place is not ready. Then, in the mind, it can take a philosophical attitude. Philosophical attitude, by that I mean that's how life is, that's how things are. Things are imperfect, and it's ideal to try and seek solace or permanence or anything that lasts in the world. So the mind can take the attitude of the sage in practice of inner detachment, stepping back so that we don't rush in impulse to act and speak. These are all fundamental practices of yoga. So instead of, the mind will teach us how to become a witness, how not to rush into things at any impulse, and then it often justifies that impulse. For instance, one gets angry, one says that, well, so and so said this to me, therefore I got angry. So a philosophical turn towards life. This is also one of the practices of equanimity, and it leads to an inner detachment, an inner peace, so that we don't go overboard with everything that is happening. A fourth practice through which equanimity can develop is resignation to the will of. It's a kind of an acceptance of things. Things are what they are. Various things will come to our life, to receive them as gifts of the divine grace. These gifts may be apparently pleasant, these gifts may be painful, but to receive them in the spirit of resignation to God. So all these things are as prasad from the divine. So, knowing with this idea or this faith that all these things are ultimately going to help me on the journey, rather than revolting, complaining, why mother has given me this, why is she doing this to me? So, faith is implicit in any kind of resignation to the will of God. The divine mother knows, she knows everything about me, she knows about my situation, circumstances, and everything else. And if this has come to me, let me receive it as a grace. The mother says that when difficulties come, you should take it as a grace. And indeed, it will turn out to be so. We realize it later, sometimes after a few years, having gone through some of these difficulties, that, oh, this was a wonderful grace because it cleansed many things, purified so much, and gave me a new boost in the aspiration, which seemed to be submerged that time. Suddenly it burst forth. So, equanimity along with aspiration is another very key practice. Then comes surrender. I am just holding on rejection for a moment because they are all interconnected. Surrender is basically that we understand this much, that whatever be my personal efforts, however great a tapaswin one may be, but whatever effort one may put, ultimately it is the grace which will determine what will come out of it. So this surrender may start with, Ma, this life is yours. this yoga which I feel called to. Even one may say, I don't know, but as Aurobindo says, he who has been chosen by he who chooses the infinite has been chosen by the infinite. So there should be no ambiguity about it. But yet there are moments when doubt may come, clouding may come. That time surrender is a big help. Mother, I am yours. I belong to you. You carry me on the path. And yet one does some kind of an effort, tries to bring up the aspiration through everything. If tears fall down, be it tears of blood, dash them and offer them at the feet of. If you offer them at the feet of the Divine Mother, surrender them to her feet, at her feet, they will turn into pearls of strength. This is the power of surrender. If one has fallen, apparently, actually fallen word is very often misused. In fall from the path, that's what it means. It's not falling in consciousness. That happens because rise and fall of consciousness leading to different vrittis and aspects of nature is not fall from the path. Fall from the path is when one leaves the path, deviates fully, wanders somewhere else. That's a rare thing, fortunately. But even there, Sri Aurobindo says, even if this has happened, no upward effort is ever wasted. And whatever one has done in one life, it is there, it remains. Not that therefore one should just wander away anywhere. And one comes back and at some point picks up the thread with whatever difficulties. So this rise and fall of consciousness, not fall in the way it is used. So all this will come, and through all this we have to keep surrendering. So surrender is required. We can only surrender when we are very honest with ourselves. There can be no surrender if we are not sincere. What it means is that, well, if I am not sincere, I'll not see that there are things in me which are very dark. They are shadow-like elements. There are things in me which resist and revolt against the divine. There are things which are hiding in a corner, which the mind is justifying, the vital is justifying. Surrender implies laying all this threadbare. So sincerity will go with aspiration and surrender. Much more so with surrender, because sincerity will show us, here, this is it. Then what we have to offer to the divine. The mother at one place says that do not try to be among the holies. Do not try to put up the show of a yogi. It's so easy to deceive the world, looking like a yogi, but can't deceive the divine. And we should not deceive us. We should see us what we are, the way we are. And then when this part is discovered, by whatever means, we should not be unhappy. Oh, I have this also. Instead, we should say, good, I have discovered this little chunk of darkness inside me, and I offer it to the mother with a will to transform. So what she says about it is that do not try to be among the holies. Rather, bear your own burden of the anti-divine. The mother uses this word. All of us. This is what is meant in Christianity as bearing your own cross. So all of us have our own difficulties. Instead of wasting time in gossiping about other people's difficulties, other people's problems, we should look into our own. We have each one has his own, bundle of issues. So my bundle of issues may not be another person's problem. So it's easy for me to see the other person's problem and for the other person to see mine, because each one has their own unique shadow. This shadow, to offer this shadow is one of the most important critical elements of the yoga. So to discover the shadow requires sincerity. One puts the will to throw it away, and one also offers it to the Divine Mother. Now, some of these shadows can get dissolved very fast because they are not shadows but patches of gray which are already opening to the light. Some with some difficulty go up, but there are spots within us which completely remain closed, tight. They don't want to come out. They don't want to surrender. They want to, they just carry on with their own life, their own independent existence, cut off from the divine light. So we should be very careful, and we have to slowly take them out. Mother says, like a pincer, pick them up and throw them far and give it to the Divine Mother. Mother, this is there hiding like a canker. This little ambition here, this little lust here, this little greed there, this little fear, all these. So we have to remove them and surrender, offer to the Divine Mother. they will come back. They have a tendency to come back. Some of them, resistant part, will come back 1,000, maybe 10,000 times. And one has to persevere, not give up. Never to say that, well, oh, I have had enough of it. I accept this. Never to accept the irreparable, as the mother says. Never to accept the incurable. Because why? Mother says this, that, why do you people think your difficulty is insolvable? Because you do not have faith in the grace. So we should have that faith in the grace, that it is bound to cure us. It is bound to heal us. It is much more powerful. It is infinity. What the human difficulties, however challenging, can stand before the grace. So surrender also implies trust and confidence in the divine. If one doesn't have trust and confidence, we don't surrender. It's like anywhere, anytime, to anyone else. We don't just surrender to anyone. We need to have trust in the divine leading. So surrender, offering, trust, confidence in the grace, all these are movements which are all interconnected. And as I said, to persevere. The more we persevere, every time we'll see that the difficulty has become, sometimes it may look as if it is rising up. Never to be disturbed by this Asuri Maya. It may create clouds of darkness, and one may think, oh my God, I thought I have conquered it, but it has come in a much worse way. Not to be discouraged. That's why the Gita says, yoga is done with a glad and not a despondent. Never to let pessimism, despair, depression of any kind touch anywhere. Why? Because the infinite is our pilot, our captain. He holds the rudder well. It's lines from yesterday I was saying, from to R on a birthday should be the right. He says that, fear not for the storms that thunder, waves that swell. Always our captain holds the rudder well. He does not sleep. So these things will come. We should be ready, because there are many areas in our nature we are not even aware. But with persistence, persistent offering, surrender, trust, confidence, faith, perseverance, endurance, as true aspiration, one goes through. So we spoke about equanimity at these levels. What is the true equanimity? The true equanimity comes from the soul. Indifference, endurance, resignation, stoic bearing of things, philosophical calm are preparations, useful preparation. The equanimity of the soul is that regardless of whatever may happen, one remains undisturbed, because one has opened the door inside and one can sit inside even if the house is going to smithereens. So that's why the first thing in this yoga is to find the soul, the psyche. First step. All these are aids and they go right through, they work all through. But the first step is to find the soul. But before we talk about it, one more thing, along with aspiration, rejection, sincerity, surrender, equanimity, is rejection. So what is rejection? What are we to reject? Well, few things outwardly also. People often say nothing has to be. What are we to reject? One thing we have to reject very importantly is hypocrisy. Mother says that all hypocrisy, show, sham, all this is so dangerous because it's direct expression of falsehood. To pose oneself as something or someone, it's there in the outer world. Never to do that in. So hypocrisy is the first step. Mother speaks of it. Says supermind, the first thing he'll throw out of the window, doesn't use the word throw out of the window, is hypocrisy. Then along with that, one has to also reject certain movements, certain habits where they are not good. For instance, alcohol and drugs, smoke, definitely dangerous. Why? Because smoking includes gutka, tobacco. It attracts all kinds of negative energies. It's a known thing, well known. All of occultists know it. Of course, if one is a smoker, keep off. It's not like one is barred from yoga if one smokes. There are people who used to smoke, used to drink, whom the mother kept, and they continued. The call is the most important. It doesn't bar us. It doesn't make us unfit for the yoga. But it'll make the Adhar weak. And therefore, even if we find the divine by some fiat of the Supreme, yet we'll find a weak Aadhar through which manifesting the divine will be very difficult, because smoking makes us restless, smoking makes us excited, irritable, it attracts all kinds of negative forces. So also with alcohol. Drugs, of course, completely, they can throw us into the lower vital states. Mother spoke about it. Very dark states, and sometimes illusorily happy states. They are actually dark states, but they are an illusion of the Asuric Maya. So these things are best not taken. Then there is also politics. Why politics? Because politics is a very dark field. Here, truth and falsehood are so badly mixed. Mother speaks of politics and the money part as the most resistant to the higher truth. So, does it mean that I'll have no views? No, of course one will have. Does it mean one will not be a patriot? Of course, patriotism can be very much part of the yogic life. Aurobindo and the mother both have mentioned. Does it mean that I'll not go for vote? No, that is part of the legal process and one should participate in that. Does it mean I'll not feel myself engaged in whatever good is happening in the country? Yes, by all means. I'll not appreciate when some particular party is doing something good. Fine. But don't become so much engaged in that party and its politics, even the best of parties. Because all parties ultimately, even the best, will be partisan. It will represent a facet. And we have to come out of a facet and look beyond every facet. So we have to get the mind rid of. So politics is the third thing. And the fourth thing that the mother and Aurobindo have spoken of is sexual intercourse. Now we have to again understand, it's not like the moment people read it, they start fighting with sexuality. It's a long process. There is a way towards it. The first is sanyama. Regulate. Don't let the sexual impulse become unbridled, perverted, chaotic. But it has to be gradually regulated, sanyama, then nigraha, then persistent offering. It may take long, sometimes very long. See letters of Aurobindo. One is not to be disheartened, because these things are rooted in the biological system, not to ever get into guilt. Guilt has no place in yoga. Zero place. Guilt belongs to the ordinary world, as the mother has said. But one persists, one tries, various ways. I've given a talk on that fully. Basically, not to be thinking about it. Oh, I have to conquer sex. Oh, I have to conquer sex. And one is constantly thinking about sex. Stay busy, do a lot of physical exercise so that by the time you come to bed, you're tired. Basically, night is the time when all these forces attack. Try to avoid situations where this impulse may come up. And that's why in certain situations, meeting, man and woman meeting alone can be very dangerous. So there are some basic rules, which are okay in society at large. It's fine, nothing wrong. It's not about morally right. We are not here to pass a moral. But from spiritual point of view, it can create too much of excitement in the being, and if persisted in, then it can lead the consciousness, it can remain tied to the lower chakra. Sex is right from the Muladhara. So it will not allow the further sublimation of the energy from the Muladhara, changing the sexual energy, which is Ritas into Tejas, Tejas into Ojas, Ojas into Viryas. So that's why it is important. But it's not with guilt, not with moral ideas, but with the spiritual consciousness, spiritual understanding. It's bad or good. In ordinary life, it has its place, and it can be a very beautiful place in ordinary relationship, completing or fulfilling an inner sense of love. But yogic life, one has to understand what it is. So these are the four external things, primarily which the other ancient will speak about. Then there are plenty of inner things which we have to do. What are the inner things? Obviously, the minds, all kinds of ideas, opinions, viewpoints. So every time we read something from the mother, no, but this cannot. I'll give you one example. There was a congress of vegetarian congress. So mother was asked for a message, and the mother didn't give a message. So 1 month passed, 2 months passed. Again they asked. So mother said, why? She says the disciple. When first time I had a very strong message to give, but I withheld it, because they'll be shocked. So the message that came to her was like a blow. Stop making fuss and eat meat. Now, this may have sounded like a campaign for meat, but it was not a campaign for meat. Many of the yogis, which includes Swami Vivekananda, it includes the Rishi Vishis, they didn't make a fuss about it. It drops off as the consciousness grows. Many of these gross tendencies, which includes spicy food, which is part of the Rajasic food, like meat. Of course, there we can have a balance in food that, well, in Indian thought, there is something very interesting that meat of animals which are four-legged, because they're a little more developed in consciousness. You're not supposed to eat that. But chicken people have taken. It's a question of consciousness. But the mother says there also, egg and the chicken, there's a story that that consciousness goes inside us and can make us restless. So one has to understand these things not from a moral standpoint, but from the yogic standpoint. And still, that is not what one should be making so much fuss about. One should be rather thinking about how to advance on the path. So this rejection, negative movements have their place. They are an important part of the yoga, but mainly 30% of the yoga energy should be directed towards it. The 70% should be directed in the positive. So, but this is the mental concept. People find it very difficult to understand. They think that if I am a vegetarian, if I don't drink and smoke, I'm already a yogi. No, sir, you may be as much attached to non-drinking. You may be as much attached and judgmental about somebody taking meat. So this yoga with white dress and organics, do it by all means. Don't mix it up with spiritual life and life, which goes way, way, way beyond this. So there are many ideas, opinions, viewpoints. For instance, if many people are being killed in a certain kind of a situation, oh, what is God doing? Where is he? These people can never understand the Mahabharata and what Krishna stood for. So one has to learn to have the calm vision. These mental ideas, conceptions, even about practice of yoga, oh, tell us something external to do. All these things are going to create more and more confusion. Only when the mind becomes quiet, it is ready to receive the true knowledge. It gets rid of all its conceptions, which are either limited conceptions or misconceptions. They become even false conceptions when we aggrandize and think that is the only thing. So all these conceptions, ideas, viewpoints, opinions, one has to gradually surrender. One of the best ways to get rid of them is by reading Mother and Shruti. So then you automatically receive that true thing for the mind immediately. And if one has sufficient surrender, one obviously says, out go these other opinions that I held so long, and come in all this new knowledge which is pouring in. Then the emotions also have these double movement. There is a true emotion which consists in giving oneself, and there is the distortions of emotions, which includes, to take, to want, to cling to something, to depend upon, to have that restlessness. All these are not right movements of emotion. So whereas the true movement of a steady inner flame of love, it's beautiful. It can exist between human beings, of course. Human relationship, friendship, care, affection are not barred in yoga. There is a whole letter of Shri Aurobindo. In fact, Shri Aurobindo says they are part of the completeness that we see. So care, for instance, flows from the psyche. Tender feelings flow from the psyche. Affection flows from the psyche. But when it becomes attachment, attachment is where I value something for my sake, for the advantage that I am getting out. That must go. Whereas when we love something for the sake of something, when we love people, love in their beautiful parts, see their beauty, don't see their defects and other things, then we begin to love people psychically. And that's something very beautiful. And similarly, in the vital, especially the lower vital, all these movements of ambition, lust, greed, fear, they pull us down and keep us tied to the lower nature. One has to get rid of them. Now, all this is a long process. And one should not start engaging in this negative fight. One has to, as and when they arise, one has to quietly and calmly, through the will, push them. Sometimes one can make a formation or an imagination that a light is coming and dissolving. It's an imagination, but all these things help. Or call mother's name. or turn the mind away when such movements arise, or get busy, read something, go for a run, whatever way, and then pray that Mother release me from these darknesses, negative things, these things that I must reject out of the system. And the physical consciousness also, laziness, obscurity, refusal to understand, doubts, inertia. So all this is part of the rejection. It is the most difficult part of the yoga. Unfortunately, many people start getting engaged with it. This, Mother and Sri Aurobindo have said very clearly, is not the main part. It is important. You have to leave certain things behind. It's called as the negative work. 30%, 20%, 30% of the energy should be for. But 70, 80% should be for the forward movement, the upward movement. For instance, supposing one has been overtaken by a wave of impulse, of sexuality or anger, then what does one do next? Not lament over it and spend hours of energy trying to get it. Instead, one should get up and aspire. So aspiration, surrender, these are the key and cornerstones of it. So these are the aspiration, rejection, surrender are the three main movements, along with equanimity, sincerity, endurance, faith, trust, confidence in the divine, perseverance, patience, because it takes long. This is the important. What about some physical practices? Well, yes, meditation and concentration are very much part of the yoga. So in this yoga, one can concentrate either in the heart or in the head or above the head. On what should we concentrate upon? On the image of the Divine Mother, Mother and Sri Aurobindo, or simply the Mother. Or one can concentrate upon something like the sun, because sun directly represents the supramental, but my personal, of course, choice is on the Mother. And then one concentrates with the Mother's name, Ma, Ma, Ma. And as one tries to go within, mind will start throwing, because of attachments, mind will start leading us here, there. Again come back. By persistent practice, one day concentration becomes easy. Nothing comes without persistent practice. So it's not something again which develops in a day. Concentrate in the center of the heart, in the chest. Don't worry about which spot. Spot is already fixed for us, and the consciousness will be pulled that side. On the image of the Divine Mother, on her presence, on her love, on her light, on her peace, or concentrate in the mind and call peace, 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 to create a beautiful basis, silence, quietude, on the Mother's presence, or above the head, somewhere above the head, on Mother's presence, or all of them together, or two of them together. Now, generally in this yoga, it's not like prolonged periods of concentration. Then one begins to become otherworldly. So maybe 20 minutes to 30 minutes, twice or thrice a day. I'm almost prescribing it like medicine, but yeah, that's how it is. So morning, afternoon, and night, one can make it 20 minutes. In the beginning, it may be 10 minutes, just calling Mother's name, if one can do nothing. But 20 to 30 minutes is a good time. 3 times a day should be enough to create a background consciousness. But the hours of concentration have to be compensated with work. Because in work, all the aspects of nature, concentration and meditation takes the consciousness inside, and it leads to discovery of the divine, doubt. But then there are other parts in nature which have to be tested, retested, molded, forged, so that they can become instrument for expression of the divine. Otherwise, one finds the divine, but the instrument is not there. So in that, all the standard practices of karma yoga come. So first step is nishkam karma. One does the work, but without any reward. Now, this reward may be either physical, monetary, etc., or it can be subtle, name, or some kind of recognition. So all this one has to, each time it arises, one has to set it aside. Then in Karma Yoga, there is also this remembering and offering to the divine. One has to remember initially with the mind that, okay, in the beginning, I'm giving this work to the Mother, I'm giving up my day to the Mother as one wakes up. And at night, that Ma, take care of my sleep, I'm offering my sleep to you. And at the end of the work, with gratitude, whatever work, which includes all actions, including taking a bath and all else that we do in the bathroom. So everything has to be offered. But slowly, this offering becomes a way of life. There is a background consciousness which develops, and one doesn't have to mentally think and remember it. It is living constantly as if under the very gaze of the divine. One knows she is there watching us. All our activities are turned towards her. So that's how the whole thing develops. So remember and offer and equanimity, all these things are part of the Karma Yoga. So as one does them, slowly the consciousness becomes thinner and thinner. And finally, as I said yesterday, the last aspect which is important is love for the bhakti. But love for the divine is very easy to say, but very difficult. It means all other love. So the question there arises, which we touch upon this, is what about other loves? We already love so many people in our life. So what do we do with them? There we have to start loving them, not as if we are possessing them, that is mine, but as aspects of the divine, that the divine is in them, to love them without expectation, to love them selflessly. It doesn't mean that we'll cater to every demand made by the other person. Certainly, that will be a foolish ignorance. To do what is the right thing, but to love them without any kind of agitation, without any expectation, without any desire, to help them grow together, because all the love that we need, we are receiving from them. And then it will not only be confined to people in our life. There will be some people always in our life which are closer because of destiny and various reasons. But there should also be a wide universal love. So love towards all creatures, love towards plants, animals, everything. Love toward even material objects should be dealt with very consciously and with love, because they also contain consciousness in them. They also have the divine presence in them. So this love will slowly become universal. And since we'll be open to the mother's love, we won't need love from anyone outside. So we'll become givers rather than takers, but givers in the most beautiful way, not givers ignorantly, not becoming martyrs, but doing what is the true thing, what is the right thing. And just as in Karma Yoga, obeying the divine impulse, divine will, rather than desire. Similarly, in love also, to give under the impulsion of the divine, the will of the divine, and not meaninglessly, just, because in love, the urge to give comes very automatically and naturally. So this is the big landscape. These are the processes. They go on, as we can see, throughout the day and night, and again next morning, and so on and so forth, for days and weeks and months and years. Slowly, as a result of it, something begins to grow within us, a presence in the heart, a flame in the heart, and the doors of the psychic begin to open. And when that happens, we have crossed one crucial stage of the most important stage. All these things will be psychic discovery. That is the door through which we can discover the divine. So all our aspirations should be for the divine. But when we do all these things, they will help us ultimately in the discovery of the psychic door. And when we discover that door, passing through it, because that's the door which leads us to the even to the central being. So discover the divine within, the presence within. What shall I say? Life is truly beautiful. Life becomes true, harmonious, beautiful, uplifted, tranquil, divine. So, any questions?
Sir, just one clarification about this, Namaskar. About we say that the body, the human flesh, is water, fire, and clay, which is again translated into light, and everything for them is a vibration. Just can you explain this?
What is the source of this? This body is fire and clay.
Water plus fire plus clay.
Basically, Panch Tattva. Is that
Yes.
perhaps you are referring to?
Panch, yes.
Yeah. So Panch Tattva includes other things also. Body is also earth as well as space, ether. So basically, it will lead us to the Sankhya doctrine as to how matter is formed. So basically, these are 5 fundamental forces in the universe. The first is etheric, ether, which creates space. So this ether is like a continuous expanse of the first primal vibration. Let's say the Nad, Om. It's spreading, and because spreading, it needs a medium. So it's the subtlest aspect of matter, which is space. That is the first element. But that doesn't create forms. Whole play is about names and forms. So this etheric vibration modifies itself and becomes the area, Vayu Tattva. So Vayu Tattva means now, let's say this in this star vibration which is spreading, there are some shob. Shob is the word used in Hindi, as if there is a disturbance, but it's not a disturbance, it's a modification. So it gets modified, and there is a seemingly clash of different waves. Now, as they clash, some forms begin to emerge, but they are not stable forms. So out of this clash and friction, the third element, modifying the aerial, there is only one substance, but modifying the aerial, it becomes the fire. Now, fire tattva, it is the heat and the light which is born from this clash, and this starts becoming like a nucleus around which certain forms can form and stay for a while. But again, these forms cannot endure. So this fiery element further cools down, as we see what happened on Earth, and it becomes more like a water. So this water flows, and we see now certain forms, flowing forms, fluid forms can form. But even this does not create solid forms. So then it, out of water, it gets modified, and the earth element of Prithvi Tattva emerges. So there is one substance which is, of course, from the divine, but it gets modified to have this creation, which is filled with many forms. So in earth, all forms will have these 5 elements. But says the form of the gods will have very little of Prithvi Tattva. Everywhere we'll see this Panch Tattva. So we'll see this Prithvi element very less in the vital world forms, and in the forms of the mental world, in the forms of the gods. You will see more and more the Jala Tattva in the lower vital creatures. That's why Jalpari and mermaids and all those story spirits inhabiting these places. Then in the higher vital worlds, we'll see more of these, in the thought worlds, we'll see more of aerial forms, the gods, more of the fire tattva, and finally the divine, pure etheric space when it takes a form. But all of the tattvas are there, but they are subordinated. This is the way creation, Nama Rup, is explained. From Sri Aurobindo's yoga point of view, in all these, ultimately they've all emerged from the one who is beyond all the 5 elements, from whom all the 5 elements have emerged. So right now, these elements are combined in a certain way so as to create a mortal body. So the body is subject to disintegration and death. But if you see the form of the gods, they are immortal. That's the interesting part. So these forms also can be modified and recombined in such a way that even the physical body can escape from the law of death. So that, of course, elaborating it further will be a whole talk, but that's the basic meaning of it.
So one question about artificial intelligence and rituals.
I have given several talks on it. Rituals, Bahya Puja, they are required for man at a stage of evolution. And there are 2 kinds of rituals, let's say. That one is when person cannot connect within, then external aid, as an external aid, when he actually physically offers the flower, physically offers the agarbatti, with the thought that this is an offering to God. It is a good way to connect oneself to the divine who is within. But if it is done just meaningless, the rituals can be done meaningless, and it doesn't carry that kind of force or power. It becomes more like a belief, like, every day I must pray at a certain time. So meaningless rituals are not that they have no force, but very little force. So they should be done more consciously. But as we grow within, we can easily dispense with them, because we don't need them to connect with the divine presence within. But then we may still do it, but now no more to connect, but to discover the divine in various ways, in various forms. So these are this much about rituals and about artificial intelligence. Well, man is doing all kinds of things. But one thing I can say is that the fact that artificial intelligence has come, it's a sign that mind has reached its peak development. It is able to create a replica of itself. Now, if it doesn't engage in spiritual evolution, it will end up destroying itself. So it is a time that we, just as scientists are engaged in AI, artificial intelligence, we should hasten for DI, divine intelligence. Then we can use these machines and instruments. Otherwise, there have been civilizations very developed, our own Mahabharata times, then Lanka, then Atlantis, the Greek, they all collapsed because the external technology developed at the expense of the inner growth. So if the inner growth develops, inner growth has no limits. AI will always have limits set by the human mind itself. But if the DI develops, even a spiritual intelligence develops, then all these things can be used in a nice way. But right now, the balance is heavily tilted in favor of AI, which is dangerous. So,
Right. Thank you.
so James,
Yeah. Thank you very much,
what we
Dr.
can
Alok.
also do is that, as I am happy that some people have put questions on the WhatsApp group you have created. So they can continue. We can stop it only when naturally the questions die off. So
No,
please feel free to, because talks cannot touch every aspect or every detail. So please feel free to put any kind of question without any hesitation.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
yeah, the platform is there. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Dr. Alok, and thank you everyone for participating. And
We meet
till
tomorrow.
tomorrow, namaste. God bless.
Thank you.
Mother's blessings to you all.